know this might surprise some fans, but the money has been invested on the pitch. My observation would be that the average wages have shot up a lot last year. I estimate the average wages to be 63 grand a week. Now, you as West Ham fans will know how well that money is being spent. So, looking at it from a business point of view, it doesn't look clever, because what we now have is a scenario where sort of wages and transfer fees are exceeding the income being generated, which means that there's nothing left over to pay all the other overheads of the club. And therefore, if they were incurring those losses, what we have seen is that the club has gone to the markets, and it has borrowed money. I think you might be aware of the rights and media loans, which are effectively secured against future broadcasting income. So, has money been spent? Yes. Has the money come in that I think fans anticipated? I would say no. The increase in capacity at the new stadium hasn't really been turned into a significant rise in matchday income. My observation is West Ham are at the top of the next division of football finance in the Premier League. So we do have the big six. If you look at how much money the club's generating per fan, it's around about 400 quid per fan overall, and that includes the prawn and sandwich brigade, whereby if you compare that to the likes of Chelsea and Spurs, Chelsea will be bringing in £1,600 to £1,700 per fan, Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool and so on, they are all up there. Manchester City are a fair amount behind those, because you've got to look at the nature of the fan base, and rightly or wrongly, some of those other clubs are able to attract people who are prepared to pay a lot of money to attend games, and they treat them accordingly. Mm-hmm. West Ham is a traditional working class club, and in terms of match day prices, again, some people might not like what I'm about to say, but the prices at West Ham are pretty reasonable compared to season ticket prices at some of the other London clubs and the bigger clubs in the northwest. So if people want more money to be coming in, one of those methods is to you either play more matches, but in order to do that, you need to qualify for Europe. You use the stadium for other purposes, but the nature of West Ham's arrangement with L20 is that effectively they are tenants. So if the stadium is used for other purposes, then West Ham aren't going to get any of that income. Or you expand the stadium, which clearly isn't feasible. So I think they are sort of hemmed in to a certain extent into how much extra money they can generate. And I do think that Gold Sullivan and Brady, they overpromised and have under-delivered in terms of saying to fans, yes, you're going to give up your spiritual home, but we're going to replace it with something bigger and better, and we're going to increase the chances of trophies. West Ham are now effectively in the same position as Newcastle. I think there are great parallels between Newcastle and West Ham in terms of we've got 50,000 plus people turning up every week. In West Ham's it's practically 60,000. So therefore we're expecting more, and that's not manifesting itself because you don't have the prawn sandwich fans to the same extent. You're not in Europe, and Europe is incredibly lucrative these days. So there's not that much further that the club can go in terms of generating income. I think that's valid. I mean, the alternative would have been building your own stadium. in a similar position to, or something similar to what's happened at Spurs. And then all of the money is kept in-house. I mean, if you take a look at what Spurs have done, and I appreciate this is a West Ham conversation, not the Spurs conversation, but Spurs have borrowed 600 million quid at 2.5%. So they're paying £15 million in interest, but they're getting an extra £40 million in gate receipts.
Right, yeah.
They're using the stadium for NFL matches, and they're getting all the money from that. They're able to have the stadium used for conferencing, for banqueting, and so on. So Spurs are generating money 365 days a year from the stadium, and because you are tenants at the London Stadium, West Ham are only generating income 25 days of the year.
Yeah.
And that puts them from a business point of view, that puts them at a disadvantage. So the extra money that Spurs generate far exceeds the interest they're paying on the loans. Spurs have got an interest-only loan, so they don't have to worry about repaying the capital for another 25, 30 years. And, I think none of us are too worried about, what's going to happen at that day, because they'll probably just kick that loan further down the road. So,
sure.
I think as a strategy, you can see the benefits to it from the owners of West Ham point of view. They got an immediate increase in income. There's a few extra million coming in. Realistically, about £8 million a year compared to the regular seasons at the Bowling Ground in match day. There has been an increase in commercial, but the gap that already existed between West Ham and the other big London clubs is far, far greater than that. And how you go about narrowing the gap in the new stadium, I think that's almost impossible. And if that's what was sold to the West Ham fan base as, this is the quid pro quo, you're giving up the ground that you love, but we are going to put you on a parallel with Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea. I think that's more a bit of a fairy story, and I think they have overpromised and under-delivered on that. And also, if you think about it, the old White Hart Lane had a capacity of 35,000, which was the same as the Bowling. So you were both coming from a very similar point, that the two management groups have taken a different strategy. And I think Spurs, I teach business at university, and I always hold, I teach football business, and I always hold Spurs as an example of, they know where they are going to be in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years' time under this management team, and they have a map. And it's also it's delivering. I mean, now that they have moved to the new stadium, and I've been there as an away fan, and I'm an old bloke like you that seen it all. Even I thought, my God, this is sensational. In the sense of having the huge bank, it is that it's a lot closer to the pitch than the London Stadium, and I think that's another issue for fans, that you do feel this sense of detachment at the London Stadium, and I do that as an away fan, and I can imagine, I don't know what your perspective is as home fans, is that you do look like that you're tenants there, whereas Spurs Stadium is clearly theirs, and you put those things together, and you can see I can understand the frustration of the West Ham fans, because I think they expected something different and something better. I think the Liverpool owners FSG do charge interest of around about 2%. I'll have to check up on that, but I think they're probably the only one. The vast majority of clubs in the Premier League are losing money, and they've got owners that want the clubs to push on and succeed and avoid relegation. So the last thing they want to do, but also I think to be seen to be doing, is taking money out of the club. If you look at Manchester United, that's another club with a fan base who have turned against the owners. The Glazers are taking out 22 million a year in dividends, which which is is a different form of cash extraction. But other than that, I think all owner loans are interest-free. Things are a little bit more complex at Palace because they've now got American owners, but I think they've even waived the interest that was due to them. So West Ham does stick out a bit, and the interest rate from Gold & Sullivan, it has now been reduced, I think, to 4.25% from around about 6.5 to 7. I've read David Sullivan's rationale for that is that by them lending to the club, it is cheaper than going to a bank. I mean, I said to you that Spurs are borrowing at 2.5% on their stadium. Manchester United are borrowing at, I think, 3.25%. So other clubs are able to borrow at cheaper rates than are being charged by the two owners at West Ham. And I think from a public relations point of view, it's a huge own goal. They are both successful guys. They're both also very smart guys. I know people that have worked with them who hold them in very high regard in terms of their business acumen. So they don't need that £1.9 million a year that they're taking out of the club because they are independently wealthy of that. So it just seems to be a rather silly decision on their behalf. I don't even think they're being particularly greedy. I think they feel that it's more of a business relationship. And again, I think that goes against the narrative they're also trying to get across to fans is that, we are two fans of the club who happen to be wealthy and have invested in it. If you then compare that to other clubs whose owners are fans, I'm a Brighton fan. We've got this guy, Tony Bloom, that's put £350 million into the club and he's never taken a penny out. And we think he walks on water as a result of that. I think Gold & Sullivan's perception by the fan base would be far more positive if they hadn't done activities such as this. I think the total interest they've now charged is around about £18 million. To them, £18 million is £18 million, but given the extent of their wealth, it's something that they would not miss over the course of their lives, because they have been successful in their other industries. There's also the very strange issues in relation to the sale of the bowling ground, whereby I would have expected two guys who are very, very smart operators in the property market to have got a better price and not allowed somebody else to really generate the profits on that deal. So I don't think they've helped themselves by doing things of this nature. If I answer your questions one by one, ultimately, Kieran Brady's remuneration is set by David Sullivan. Because if you now look, he's got 51.1% of the club, so it's his call. If that is linked to financial performance in terms of generating income, and they can point to the fact that commercial income has risen recently, then there could be a performance-related issue connected to that. Commercial income at 36 million, it's higher than anybody else in what we probably call these days the other 14, with the exception of Everton. And Everton's money's coming from the Ukraine and through rather strange routes. So I think you've got to take Everton's figure with a pinch of salt. So they are doing better than Newcastle and Leicester and so on. So if I was looking at it from afar, I could say, well, if that was a full-time role, I think that rise would probably be justified. And you take a look at what other chief executives of Premier League clubs are earning, and there's quite a few of them who are on seven-figure sums. If it is a part-time role, if it's just a figurehead role that Kieran Brady has, and I don't know the insights of how West Ham works, and I don't know how many days a week she's there, then it does seem on those terms to be excessive. I know one or two chief executives because where I teach at university, we run one of the courses we run is how to be a football chief executive, and some of them are really kind and they give up their time and they come in, and it's quite clear that they are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You've only their attention to detail, their knowledge, their ability to explain things from a business perspective in terms of the club, but whilst also linking that to what's happening on the pitch, always tends to impress me. Now, the noises I hear from West Ham fans is that Karen Brady has a number of other roles. Clearly, we know about her on The Apprentice. We know that she's involved in some other work-related issues as well. And if she's only there as a figurehead, and therefore the day-to-day operational issues are being delegated to somebody else, then that remuneration would seem to be excessive, unless we are underestimating the number of hours she's working, and also perhaps underestimating the fact that as a figurehead, she might be able to attract sponsorship deals with commercial partners that somebody from another part of industry wouldn't be able to do so. One of the things that's saying is that there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of wages. So if fans are wanting players to come in at the next level of player, I don't think that that's realistic for West Ham. The average wage went up, according to my figures, and my figures are it is just glorified guesswork, but the feedback I get is that I'm normally not too far away. West Ham's average wage went up from around about £49,000 to £63,000 a week in 2018-19. So that's a very significant increase. You'll be able to tell me whether you felt that that's been reflected on increased quality of performances on the pitch. So I think West Ham are okay. What we have seen in 2019 is that the wages of practically every club that has reported went up significantly, with the exception of Arsenal. And the reason why Arsenal's went down quite a bit was that they didn't qualify for the Champions League, and their players all have penalty contracts if they fail to make the top four. So Arsenal's went down, everybody else's went up quite a bit, and that's something I expect to see for all of the other clubs. Only 7 of the 20 clubs have reported their results to date, but that certainly is a trend that we are seeing, and that's due to 2 factors. We now realistically have 6 clubs at the top vying for 4 positions in terms of Champions League, because the Champions League is worth up to 110 million a year compared to the Europa League being worth 40. So there's competition at the top of the division, and also that there's desperation at the other positions in the Premier League to avoid relegation. So agents and players are taking advantage of that by demanding higher wages. Otherwise, they'll say, well, we could go to West Ham, we could go to Everton, we could go to Newcastle. You're all paying wages of roughly the same. What are you going to do for our client to make it worth his while? So I think West Ham don't have a lot of opportunity to spend much more on wages, but I don't think that they're in a dangerous position at present. If they drop down into the Championship, then it becomes awkward, because I don't know whether Gold and Sullivan are prepared to lend more money in the short term. Certainly, going back to Mike Ashley, who is another pantomime villain of football club ownership, when Newcastle went down in 2016, the first thing he did was that he opened his wallet and he lent them a further 35 million interest-free to get straight back up to the Premier League. Now, some people say he was being generous. I look at it from a business point of view. He was just protecting the value of his investment, because a club in the Championship, you're going to struggle to get more than 100 million for. He's currently looking for 330 million in the Premier League. So he did it for the best interest of Mike Ashley, but he still did it, and he still did it interest-free. So if West Ham were relegated, what would their strategy be? How many of the players are on relegation clauses in their contract? How many players would be looking to move on at a significant fee? So there'll be lots of unknowns at this stage. They would cope in the Championship, and if truth be told, the Championship's far more fun than the Premier League. it would be catastrophic because you do have the parachute payments, especially the first 2 years. That there still are decent sums. I think what would happen is that those players who are out of contract in the year of relegation, they'd all be released, and others. I suspect most clubs these days have 25% relegation clauses built in. Some go a bit higher. It depends how strong you are in negotiations at the time of signing the player. So financially, the club would not implode. I still think that you would sell out every home match, so you still have your match day income coming in. The commercial partners would take a hit, so I don't know how much Betway are paying you, but it's estimated to be around about £7 to £8 million in the Premier League. I think you could probably lock most of us. You'd be closer to $1 million. If you get $1 million in the Championship, you're doing ridiculously well.
Yeah.
So there would be a hit in terms of income. I think a combination of player sales, parachute payments, and the fact that you're selling out every week would mean that you'll be fine. Provided you come up relatively quickly. I mean, that's always the factor. If not, you'd have to adjust. In a similar position to Sunderland, they've had to have significant cutbacks. And the tragedy of getting relegated, it's actually not what's happening on the pitch. It's all the support staff. So, Aston Villa got rid of 600 staff when they were relegated from the Premier League in 2016. And it's those people, it's the people that have worked in the back office and so on. And that is the untold story of relegation. It's the people who are West Ham through and through that I fear for most of all. We both know that players come and go, as do managers. And we're not loyal to players and managers, we're loyal to the shirt. And I think it's the people in the back office who are just as loyal to the shirt as we are as fans that get hit worst of all. Yeah, I've got a ticket. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't miss it. Neither side can afford to lose. We've just come through a series of nice fixtures, and we've not done particularly well. So we got to get our arse into gear as well. We sort of dropped from being 8 points above the drop to 2 points, and it's squeaky bum time. Norwich, definitely. I think Villa potentially will go down. I think they are very reliant on Grealish, who is a cracking player. We all take the piss out of his hairdo and his stocks are down. But actually, you give him a football, and it reminds me of old school. Sort of the Tony Curry style of footballer who as fans you always love to watch. And then it's one from 4 or 5, and we're one of those 4 or 5. I think you'll be fine. You'll get a bit of decent home form. You're looking for another 3 victories realistically, and then you get a few more draws on top of that, and you'll be fine.